Isn't it great to have football finally started and underway? Yes. What a great weekend. Great crowd today. Had a great crowd last week, and I was made aware of this oversight just a few minutes ago. That in the craziness of last week, last week. Was it not unbelievable? Was that not one of the greatest meetings ever? I failed to get our unofficial pastor, our official pastor of the Touchdown Club, up to bless our food.
And Arkansas still won.
Arkansas still won. And I made the point, I apologized, and I said, listen, God even knew we were running behind last week, and we need to get on with it. So without further ado, Gary Underwood, would you come up and bless this meal appropriately, please?
Absolutely, and if we lose Saturday, I'll never get to pray again. What a great Saturday we had. Wasn't that great? Except for the 175-degree heat down on the field, which I was pretty close to on the second row, but it was a great day. Good to have all of you here. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the beautiful day, the opportunity to gather together and enjoy each other's company and fellowship. Thank you for the food, those that prepared it and those that served it. Lord, we just ask you to be with us today as we continue to serve in your name. Amen.
I was also made aware by Rex that because I'm not married, I don't get all this anniversary stuff right. That usually on the anniversary you celebrate at the end of the year. Well,
It's like a wedding anniversary.
like a wedding anniversary. Well, this is not a wedding. This is we're celebrating our 10th year together. What a start! Coach Bielema the first week, all the Cowboys the last week, and of course Dan Hampton today. And, of course, Tom Osborne, one of the greatest coaches in the history of college football, next week. So, boy, starting off on a good way. Do want to remind everybody, big week this week. High school football started last night. There's 2 games tonight at War Memorial Stadium. It's a kickoff classic tonight. Then Thursday night, I want to invite you. It's the Big Shootout documentary movie. It's a 90-minute movie at the Clinton Center. It's an unbelievable movie. I know you don't want to see the end and the score again, but the backstory is unbelievable. And so if you want tickets, you can see me or go to 1037thebuzz.com. Coach Broyles is coming down. It's very rare that we're going to get him with some of the players from that game. And even James Street, our old nemesis, the quarterback from Texas, is coming in. The governor will be there. So I encourage you to be there Thursday night at the Clinton Center for the Big Shootout. Friday, you got the Paul Ills Classic Golf Tournament. You can register that for paulills.org. And, of course, you got the Razorbacks coming to War Memorial this Saturday. And I hope we have, if you hadn't got your tickets, I hope you get those now and don't wait till the last minute. I was talking to Dan. Dan was like, he said, who did you have here last weekend? And when I was ripping off, he said, man, that's unbelievable. And I think Cliff Harris was so thrilled to have the turnout and to have his buddies there. And it was just a great day. And I want to thank all of you for being here to support that. It was really a neat meeting. I do want to thank all of you for RSVPing. You're doing a good job. Go to lrtouchdown.com. We're already at 400 in our membership already in just 2 meetings. But I know that some of you have not joined. Please join for us. $50, you can join. You can pay $75 and you become a member of the National Football Foundation where you vote on the College Football Hall of Fame. And you're in the College Football and NFL Hall of Fame, I would presume, right, Dan? So you get a chance to vote. He's whatever. Yeah, we'll find out in a few minutes when Jim introduces him. But you do get a chance to vote for the College Football Hall of Fame. So if you've already joined, you want to go back, do that. Go to lrtouchdown.com. Or also, you can join the Arkansas Sports Hall of Fame. We've got it where you can buy all 3 for only $125. Touchdown Club, National Football Foundation, and the Arkansas Sports Hall of Fame. Really cool. We call it a Super Sports membership. We hope you take advantage of doing that. It would really be cool. I want us to be one of the fastest growing National Football Foundation chapters in America. We mentioned last week was the Cliff Harris Award. I'll mention here in a few more minutes about the Dan Hampton Award and the sponsorship there. And our Sully Award, we started with, already started getting some calls for the best high school and college calls in Arkansas for the Sully Award. I do want to thank our sponsors real quick. Twin City Limousine, thank you, Dale Bennett, Greg Hatcher, and Popeye. 1037 The Buzz had Dan on a few minutes ago. He did a great job. They're broadcasting live every Monday here at the Embassy. Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau, we're proud to be called the Little Rock Touchdown Club. Metters, Adams, and Lee. Andrew Metters, thank you for your support of this club. See him for all your insurance needs. Epic Health, Mike Whitfield. I think Mike is, where's Mike? he managed to meet Roger Staubach, so I think he's good. I think he's good for life now. So he said his affiliation with the club is great. But they'll take care of it. Epic Health, guys, if you're feeling a little bit below where you need to be, let them come take a good look at you and screen you and see if they can help you out. Wright, Lindsay, and Jennings, the sponsor of our Cliff Harris Award. Really glad to have them on board. Judy Henry, thank you for your sponsorship. We'll be working closely with them as we go forward with that award. Crane Automotive, Larry Crane, I think I just saw him walk in. Drew Dees, thank you guys for being supportive. Make sure when you go by any of the Crane dealers that you say you're a member of the Touchdown Club and you get the Touchdown Club discount. Right, Drew? Whatever that may be that day.
Make it up as
Exactly right. Hey, whatever works. Thanks, Larry. The Democrat Gazette, Wally Hall and Tabitha Cunningham, thank you so much for the Democrat Gazette for your sponsorship all these years. Metropolitan National Bank, Lunsford. Lunsford, Dan may be, but Dan, he always gets to sit by the guest. He is the biggest guy we've ever had on the head stage. Look at him, Lunsford, hands off. Dan said, Lunsford, have you ever played at a Lotion? And I tell Lunsford, said, well, if you want to go there, we'll take you there. Whatever you want. But Metropolitan, thank you so much, Lunsford, for your support the last 9 years and all the folks all here at the front for Metropolitan. I did want to do a special thanks right now for the sponsor of our two other awards. We've mentioned the Willie Rofe Award and, of course, the Dan Hampton Award. And, y'all, when I came up with this, I was thinking after we did the Cliff Harris, award that goes to the top small college defensive player of the year, and Dan decided to come. And I've been after Dan for a few years. I got to thinking, I thought, how ironic we had an NFL Hall of Famer in Willie Rofe last year, and we got an NFL Hall of Famer in Dan Hampton. I mean, two of the best to ever play the game of football that are Arkansans. And it hit me. I thought, you know what? We need to take advantage of those. Yeah, let's give a round of applause for that itself. And at a big banquet every year, of course, we honor everybody, and most of them are skill position players and receivers. And I thought, how cool would it be to recognize the top defensive lineman in high school all across the state and the top college player? And how cool would it be to say I won the Dan Hampton Award as a high school senior or junior or a college player? And he goes on to maybe be a star in the NFL, and then they reference, that young man won the Dan Hampton Award back in 2014. So I'm really excited. And when I called Nan Trammell at Wendy's, I said, Nan, I got two new awards I want you to consider sponsoring. No more than I get Dan Hampton out of my mouth. She goes, count us in. And that come to find out that Nan is a longtime fan of Dan and a big supporter of Dan and enjoyed his days as a Razorback. The Chicago Bears. That was really the big thing. And so, Nan, thank you so much. Wendy's of Arkansas is such a great sponsor, and we're glad that you're underwriting both Dan's award and Willie Rofe, two of the really good guys to ever play the game of football, and glad to have that award. Let's give a round of applause to all of our great sponsors, if you will. I do want to thank all of our 50-yard line members. We have Rex over 30.
Wow.
And those are folks who pay $250, and that was really a big boost to the club. And I told Dan, I said, you're going to have to get your picture made for a few minutes after. And so here's the deal. If, the 250-yard line member or the 50-yard line members get their pictures, they pay for it, and they get your pictures with the speaker each week. So let those folks get theirs. And then after that, if the speaker wants to stay to take some more pictures to get autographs, they can. But we've got to take care of those folks who bought those 50-yard line memberships. I also want to thank all the folks here at the Embassy Suites who just do such a good job for us. Wayne and Beth and Dwayne Duncan. Where's Dwayne at? If you want a picture, Dwayne's your man. Thank you, Dwayne, for doing such a good job, especially last week. It was crazy. Matt Johnson, I want to tell you right now, if your friends can't be here and they want to hear Dan Hampton, text them and go to lrtouchdown.com. And we are live streaming, Dan, what you're going to say today. So anybody, even over in Syria, if they wanted a break from the fighting, can have a chance to watch Dan Hampton today speak. And Green Bay, yes. Anybody in Green Bay, Wisconsin? I do want to thank also Kelly Lassane, our executive director, who does such a good job. It's been a madhouse, and Kelly's been spot on. Let's give a round of applause for Kelly. She's done such a good job. And Dan, we have the number one best group. We have a team of 10, and I haven't said them by name. Just bear with me. These girls, y'all know them. They check in every week. I want them to stand when I call your name. Marilyn Miller, Melissa Nelson, Lauren Landers, Marnie Sharp, Hope Hankins, Shelley Seitz, Jennifer Owens, Julie Tabor, and Courtney Bokerman. Would you please, let's give them a round of applause wherever you're at. We could not do it without them, no question about it. And finally, it is the start of the football season, so it's time for, let's hear it, Rex Nelson, everybody.
Thank you, David. Dan, welcome. You know, you have to be careful with this attempted humor stuff. Sometimes people take it wrong. Dan walks up, David can confirm this, and he looks at me and he says, I know you from somewhere. And I said, believe me, it was all good, whatever it was. Whatever I said in the wine cellar all those years ago, Dan, I didn't mean it. It was 3 a.m., you know, the old wine cellar. Used to call it the swine cellar, those of you of a certain age will remember. Then you had the Checkmate in North Little Rock, Basil, which was the Selectomate, but we won't go there. We just won't go there at all, because we do finally have college football. As of a Sunday, we'll have pro football. I was watching Dan over the weekend on the Pro Football Weekly show on CSS. If you've got Comcast cable here, you can see that. I was fortunate in that in my sports writing career, the one Super Bowl I ever got to cover was Super Bowl 20 in New Orleans. Wally let me go down there and cover that for the Arkansas Democrat, and it was quite a week. Jim McMahon mooned a television helicopter at one point. You'll remember, among other things. Buddy Ryan and Mike Ditka, the defensive coordinator and head coach, weren't talking to each other, so that made for an interesting situation, and actually had competing news conferences at the same time after the game, so you had to decide whether you were going to write about the offense or the defense. But welcome, it's a delight to have you. All right, college football review, let's run through it. Got a lot to talk about. It was a hot start, shall we say, to the college football season. Temperatures in the mid-90s in Fayetteville at kickoff. The first aid station reported that 54 people were treated during the game. Now, it's not what you think. It was not for dehydration. It was because they were hit in the nose.
Hold on. We just lost our sound.
Hello?
Check. Rex, I hope you're a loud talker.
I am. I'm loud.
What you say, Gary? What is that?
I didn't touch anything.
Hold on.
Wait, here.
You want to take it off? Try that.
There's some dance here.
There we go. Well, Hello. Everybody awake now? All right, college football. As I was saying before I was so rudely cut off, it was a hot start to the college football season. Temperatures in the 90s at kickoff in Fayetteville, the first aid station reporting 54 people treated during the game itself. Not what you would think, though. It was not for dehydration. It was because they were socked in the nose after turning to the person next to them and asking that inane question, is it hot enough for you? Don't you hate that? Yes, it was hot enough for me. Jonathan Williams rushes for 151 yards. Alex Collins 131 yards as the Brett Bielema style of offense proves popular in a 34-14 victory over Louisiana Lafayette. The Hogs almost doubled the Ragin' Cajuns in total offense. 522 to 274, a balanced Arkansas attack. How about that? 292 yards rushing, 230 yards passing. Good day for Brandon Allen, I thought, overall. 15 of 22, 230 yards, 3 touchdowns. On defense, 4 sacks for Arkansas. They forced 2 turnovers. After netting 136 yards on their first 2 possessions, the Cajuns have just 138 yards the rest of the game. The defensive adjustments were very good. So Louisiana Lafayette falls to 0-37 against the SEC all-time. They are 0-5 against Arkansas all-time. Congratulations to Zach Hocker. He becomes Arkansas's all-time leading scorer with his field goal on the final play of the first half. Previous record set by Bill Burnett from 1968 to 70. Now, I know we got some old-timers like Rasco. How many of you saw Bill Burnett play at the University of Arkansas? A lot. Look at that. All right, now this is going to be a smaller group. How many of you saw Bill Burnett play for the Smackover Buckaroos? Anybody? Yes, there's a few. Saw him in high school. Yep, was a Buckaroo. I knew we would have at least a few. Alex Collins, meanwhile, becomes the first Razorback freshman to rush for more than 100 yards in his first game since Felix Jones did it for Arkansas back in 2005. It was the most rushing attempts in a game for Arkansas since a 2008 loss to Kentucky. And so Brett Bielema is 1-0. He's been talking about 1-0 as Arkansas's coach. And Frank Broyles is still the last Razorback coach to begin his career with a loss, that being in 1958. Elsewhere around Arkansas, with 12 players having been ruled academically ineligible, UAPB, no match for Arkansas State, had a good crowd in Jonesboro, more than 30,000. Brian Harsin era, it's another new era. In fact, it's the fourth era in 4 years in Jonesboro. 62-11, it was a game in which the Red Wolves really could have named their score. 4 Red Wolves, get this, 4 gained more than 100 yards rushing. That's only the 7th time that has ever happened at the FBS level of the NCAA. ASU had 672 yards of offense. Of that, 509 came on the ground. That's just 17 yards shy of a school record. The Red Wolves had 480 yards by halftime, scored on 9 of their first 10 possessions. The only one they didn't score on, they kneeled it out at the end of the first half. 100-yard rushers, David Oku with 124, Sir Gregory Thornton. Now, he hasn't been knighted. That's his actual name, Sir Gregory. I like that name. Sir Gregory Thornton with 112, Michael Gordon with 102, and quarterback Freddie Knighton out of Pulaski Academy. You'll remember him with 101 on just 3 carries in the game. Now, get this. There were only 4 college football teams in the country, David, with 2 or more 100-yard rushers this past weekend. 2 of the 4 were in Arkansas and Arkansas State. So congratulations to both of them. Also, a blowout opener for UCA. The Bears rolled to a 58-7 victory over Incarnate Word on Thursday night. Yes, that's the name. Before 10,455 in Conway. 5 Bears were suspended for this game, but it didn't matter. Sophomores Blake Beasley and Danzel Williams had 85, 50 yards rushing, respectively. Winrick Smothers, good game at quarterback. I love that name, Winrick Smothers. Sounds like he ought to be the 4th or the 5th, doesn't he? Winrick the 5th. 27 of 31 passing, 267 yards, 1 TDs. The Bears had 523 yards of offense, led 30-0 at halftime. This week they go to Colorado. It'll be interesting to see how they perform out there. All right, the SEC's killing me. Got 14 teams now. Non-conference, David, that means 13 games. So take a big breath. You ready? Here's a 13-game rundown. Showdown of top 10 teams. Clemson holds off Georgia 38-35. Taj Boyd throws for 3 touchdowns, runs for 2 more. He needs to be near the top of your Heisman watch list now. Tigers may have been inspired by the fact that the old scientific rocket himself, Danny Ford, you remember him. He was inducted into the school's Ring of Honor at halftime. So Clemson has now defeated 2 SEC powers back-to-back, LSU in the Chick-fil-A Bowl, now Georgia. And did you hear they were chanting ACC, ACC at the end of that game? A little Dabo will do you. LSU, meanwhile, goes to Jerry Jones's AT&T Stadium and takes care of business against TCU, 37-27, under new offensive coordinator Cam Cameron. I thought they looked pretty good. The Tiger offense gets it done. Zach Mettenberger, spit that out, threw for 251 yards. How about the start of the Bobby Petrino era at Western Michigan? Western Kentucky, wherever the heck he is.
Wow.
They cycle through Kentucky as the Hilltoppers beat Kentucky 35-26 in a game played in Nashville. Go figure, played it in Nashville. Petrino, though, 9-0 in season openers. He's 5-1 against Kentucky all time. And get this, in games in which Bobby Petrino has had more than a week to prepare, he's 28-8 as a head coach. This was considered a Western Kentucky home game. 47,000 there for that. Meanwhile, another former guy that coached in Arkansas, Gus Malzahn, 1-0 as head coach at Auburn, 31-24 over Washington State. You knew that Malzahn versus Mike Leach, both of whom have spoken to this club, would have produced a wild game, and that was a wild game at Auburn. Mississippi State's offense, they forgot to show up, didn't they? In a 21-3 loss to Oklahoma State. Is the bloom off the Dan Mullen rose in Stark Vegas? Well, we'll have to see about that. Meanwhile, the Coach Butch Jones era at Tennessee begins with a 45-0 win over Austin Peay. I don't care. They've still got the best yell in college football. Let's go Peay. Let's go Peay. Rajon Neal rushes for 141 yards for the Tennessee Volunteers. In fact, this is so long, I kind of need to go Peay. Mack Brown. Mack Brown. No, not that Mack Brown. He rushes for 112 yards as Florida beats Toledo 24-6. Missouri. I still have a hard time with Missouri in the SEC. That's something just doesn't click. They had a 58-14 win over Murray State as James Franklin, no, not the Vanderbilt coach, this is a player, James Franklin, passes for 318 yards and 3 TDs. And then there's Johnny, I have personal issues, Manziel. He throws 3 TD passes as Texas A&M beats Rice 52-31. Manziel, surprise, surprise, was not available to the media after the game. I don't blame him for not letting that guy talk to the media. Number 1, Alabama cruises by Virginia Tech 35-10 in Atlanta. The Tide now has 2 weeks to prepare for Texas A&M. Alabama had just 97 yards of offense at halftime. They finished with 206 yards. Last year they averaged 445 yards per game. So at least their coach, who likes to harp on things, as you know, will have something to harp on the next few weeks. A.J. McCarron, just 10 of 23 passing, 110 yards. Bama, 96 rushing yards. Back on Thursday, Jeff Scott goes 75 yards as Barry down here screams out. Tommy gets his heart broken. 75 yards for a touchdown. 1:07 left. Ole Miss outlasts Vanderbilt. Great game if you watched it. 39-35. Vandy had gone ahead on a 34-yard touchdown pass just 23 seconds earlier. That win ends a 3-game Ole Miss losing streak to Vanderbilt. The first Vanderbilt sellout in a home opener at Nashville since they played Notre Dame there back in 1996. That ends a 7-game Commodore winning streak. Also Thursday, South Carolina beats... Now the roof is falling apart. Look at this. Also Thursday, South Carolina beats North Carolina. I've got dandruff 1. South Carolina beats North Carolina 27-10. South Carolina jumps to a 17-0 first quarter lead. I'm getting kind of antsy, Dan, as the Gamecocks outgain North Carolina 203-35. All right, we made it to the SEC, thank goodness. This week, Arkansas State at Auburn. Does anybody in there like the Red Wolves to go on the road and beat Gus Malzahn? Look at there. There's a few. All right. Florida is at Miami. Now, here's a good game. South Carolina at Georgia. How many of you like South Carolina to go between the hedges and make Georgia 0-2? How many of you like Georgia to win at home? It's like a majority, pretty well split there. Miami of Ohio is at Kentucky. UAB is at LSU. Alcorn State's at Mississippi State. Holy Toledo is at Missouri. Southeast Missouri State is at Ole Miss. Western Kentucky at Tennessee. How many of you like Bobby Petrino to go into Tennessee and win at Knoxville? Anybody? There's a handful that do. Sam Houston State at Texas A&M. Austin P, let's go P, at Vanderbilt. And Samford at Arkansas Saturday night at War Memorial Stadium. So in Arkansas this week, we have Hendricks cranking up football, Jim Rasco, for the first time since 1960. That's 1 o'clock. Can you see that and still get back to Little Rock for the Razorback game? Westminster at Hendricks. Southern Nazarene is at Henderson on Saturday night. Sanford plays Arkansas here in Little Rock. So we have games in Conway, Arkadelphia, and Little Rock. Get out and see a college football game this weekend. Thank you, everybody.
Wow. Take a rest there, Rex. My goodness. I did fail to mention, I was just noticing Charlene Francis. Where is Charlene? Please stand. Let's give her a round of applause. I failed to mention her as one of our check-in girls. Listen, I got to keep up with all you girls. It's a big crew back there, but thank you all, and Rex, good job there. Before we bring Dan up, I just wanted to say that I mentioned last week, Dan, that doing these bookings for the Touchdown Club, it used to be you'd call and pick up the phone and talk over the phone. Well, nowadays it's all about texting, and so just like Cliff Harris, Dan and I have done a lot of texting together. And again, as I said last week, I know how Manti Te'o developed what he developed. And that I shared with the crowd last week, Dan, that after I text you something, and I also texted my girlfriend, I thought it was surprising that I had not heard from her for about 20 minutes. And then that fear that just went over my body as I looked at my text and I saw to my 6'6", 300-pound friend, I miss you text to him from me.
That's disturbing.
I'm endearing.
So
Very disturbing.
I immediately stood up and sort of pumped my chest up, did some push-ups, and I texted my, Dan, that wasn't for you, right? And he has to look at that minute that he gets that text and go, miss you. Wow, this Basil guy, maybe it's not a good idea to go to Little Rock after all. I don't know. I will say this, that my buddy Tommy Smith used to refer to me as like the mini Dan Hampton. I think he and I, he thought that you and I sort of looked the same and only about a foot shorter and about 100 pounds difference. I will say this, that for a while, when Dan was single for about 6 years, he's happily married now, I've been married for 12 years, but when he was single, I was single too. And occasionally I would run across an attractive girl, and I would run across her and they would go, oh, I think she's been out with Dan Hampton. And it so happened, it would always be the same type of look of a girl. Very attractive, a lot of blonde hair, and a very curvy figure. And needless to say, I could not hang with you, Dan. It was not even close. That was no mini Dan at all. But I do want to thank him for coming, because I've tried for 4 years 2-3 years ago to get him here. I know he's very busy, but I'll say this before Jim gives his introduction. Being from Florida, I didn't get a chance to watch Dan play as a Razorback, but since obviously having played at the university, I saw films. He's the kind of guy, as a defensive lineman, that you love to play linebacker behind, because he's going to take up blockers. He's a big body. He throws himself in the mix. He's hard to block one-on-one, and there's no surprise why he's been such a success. And that's why I thought of all the guys that you would like to have an award named after that epitomizes what a defensive lineman is this guy right here. And not only his physical attributes, which obviously he's a big guy, but he's a passionate guy. We had him on the show this morning. He loves this state. He's got an amazing story to tell. And I know that, Dan, when we announced the lineup, I know a ton of people were excited to hear that you were coming. I know you have some special guests you want to thank. But on behalf of the Touchdown Club, I want to thank you for coming. And Jim Rasco, will you come up and give him an official introduction?
Okay, according to my research, Dan fell out of a tree way up above his treehouse in the summer before he entered the 7th grade, shattering both legs, breaking ankles, breaking an arm in 4 places, 4 months in a wheelchair, and his doctor told him he'd be lucky to walk and certainly never able to participate in sports. So he started to play the saxophone and 5 other musical instruments. He also sang and played the bass guitar in a band. He couldn't play football until his junior year in high school. In 1974, as a senior at Jacksonville High, he was named first-team All-State, named to the Associated Press Super Team, and was selected to play in the Arkansas High School All-Star Game. As a freshman at Arkansas, he lettered, and the Razorbacks won the Southwest Conference and beat Georgia 31-10 in the Cotton Bowl. His outstanding play as a sophomore made him first-team All-SWC preseason pick for his junior year. Injury slowed him a little during the 1977 regular season, but he was named second-team All-SWC and one of the leaders of the Hogs defense that beat Oklahoma 31-6 in the Orange Bowl on January the 2nd, 1978. He had a crucial fumble recovery to set up the Razorbacks' second touchdown. During his senior season, 1978, he led the Razorback defense, 98 tackles. He recovered 3 fumbles. At the end of the season, he was named first-team All-SWC, best defensive lineman of the conference. Then the Houston Post named him Defensive Player of the Year for the Southwest Conference. Football coaches named him first-team All-America, and the Chicago Bears drafted him in the first round, the number 4 overall pick. He then spent 12 seasons as a starter for the Bears. In his first year, he was named the NFL's All-Rookie team. In his second year, he was second-team All-Pro and also named to play in the Pro Bowl. 1982, first-team All-Pro, another Pro Bowl. Also, Professional Football Writers named him NFL Defensive Player of the Year. 1984, 11.5 sacks, 3 fumble recoveries, first-team All-Pro, NFC Defensive Lineman of the Year, and his third Pro Bowl. Now let's relive the magical season of 1985. Mike Ditka's the head coach and Buddy Ryan's the defensive coordinator in charge of his famous 46 defense. On November the 17th, the Bears give the Cowboys their worst beating in franchise history, 44-0. The following week, they shut out the Falcons, 36-0. The Bears go 15-1 for the regular season. Dan Hampton's named second-team All-Pro at both defensive end and at defensive tackle. He's also named to play in his 4th Pro Bowl. Buddy Ryan was quoted as saying that Hampton was the cornerstone to our 46 defense by drawing constant double teams. The playoffs start on January the 5th, 1986. The Bears shut out the Giants 21-0. And the following week, they shut out the Rams 24-0. The first time in playoff history a team records 4 consecutive shutouts. And that takes us to Super Bowl Sunday, January 26, 1986. On the second scrimmage play of the game, Jim McMahon calls the wrong formation, sends Walter Payton the wrong way. Payton is hit and fumbles the ball to the Patriots on the 19. The Bears defensive unit enters the game. They stop the Patriots cold for no gain and 3 downs, so the Patriots kick a field goal for a 3-0 lead. Later in the first quarter, with the score tied 3-3, Dan Hampton recovers a fumble on the Patriots' 13-yard line. That turns the game around, and before the end of the third quarter, the Bears lead 44-3. The Bears defense picks up a safety with 5 minutes to go to win the Super Bowl, 46-10. In both 1986 and 1988, Dan is named first-team All-Pro and a Pro Bowl alternate. During his football career, he endured 10 knee surgeries, 5 on each knee, and he had 2 more just after finishing his 12th NFL season in 1990. After his retirement, it's no surprise he was named the NFL's All-Decade Team for the 1980s. For his college play, he was named the Razorbacks All-Decade Team of the 1970s, Southwest Conference All-Decade Team, also the Razorbacks All-Century Team, and the University of Arkansas Sports Hall of Honor. On a personal note, I had the honor of being the president of the Arkansas Sports Hall of Fame and in charge of the banquet when Dan was inducted in our State Hall of Fame on February 21, 1992. Dan has never forgotten his Arkansas roots, and he chose to be presented into our Hall of Fame by his former high school coach, who's with us today, Bill Reed. Stand up, Bill. Speaking of the Arkansas Sports Hall of Fame, 9 years earlier, when Lou Holtz was inducted in 1983, Holtz chose 25-year-old Dan Hampton to be his presenter. In closing, I don't have any idea how many players have suited up for the Arkansas Razorbacks football teams because 2013 is the 118th season that the Hogs are fielding a team. I'm certain that several thousand young men have worn the red and white of the Razorbacks, but of the thousands of former Razorback players, only 2 have been elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. In 1978, Lance Allworth became the first Razorback to be inducted in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Then on August 3, 2002, the second former Razorback was inducted in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. You remember him as Razorback number 86, and then as Chicago Bear number 99. So please welcome Pro Football Hall of Famer Dan Hampton.
This is your life.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, folks. Please. Thank you, Jim. That's fantastic. I tell you what, I'm glad I wrote it exactly the way you wrote it. That's beautiful. Thank you for coming out today, folks. Of course, you're late, yeah, okay. Just so many thoughts running through my mind. I really do appreciate that little stroll back through the memory bank. You know, when I got off the plane on Sunday, very seldom do I ever come back to this state and not just be overwhelmed by the memories of all the great people and all the great times and how lucky I've been in my life. And, you know, this guy right here that just stood up, Bill Reed, all this would not have been possible if it wasn't for him and his perseverance and trying to get me out. And I'll get into that in a second. I just want to, real quick, I wanted to say, you know, thank you, Coach Reed, for coming. Also, Ken Turner, who recruited me to play for the University of Arkansas, is right here. Ken Turner. Thank you, Steve Strange, for bringing him. Steve does a lot of great things up in Conway. I got my brother here, a number of my friends. My former teammate, J.R. Ross, came up earlier. I don't know where you're at, J.R. But Mike Erie, who played 4 years behind me, he was my ex-cousin-in-law. He's now my financial planner. His motto is, we cheat you for less. And I said, well, it makes sense to me. But it's so wonderful to walk around and see all these folks that I haven't seen in a long time. Ronnie Schrader. Love Ronnie Schrader. Ronnie Schrader and I got in business 30 years ago. Ronnie and I got into this pipe business. And I never forget, I went home and I told my wife, well, I got in business with Ronnie Schrader today. She goes, doing what? And I said, we're going to be selling pipes. She goes, yeah, you won't be able to sell anything. She got real negative. And I said to myself, I'll promise you, I'll prove her wrong. And I did. By the end of that summer, I had to sell our car, our boat, our motorcycle. But we're still friends. And I love Ronnie Schrader. He was the Purple Bear at UCA back, I don't know how long ago. But so many wonderful memories. And again, thank you for that wonderful introduction. You know, I'm glad I wasn't here last week because I never liked the Cowboys. And I got to tell you, okay, we're going to get into it here. And I know we're running a little bit late.
Take your time.
But you know, I know Cliff Harris, and I love Cliff Harris. It's so deserving for him to have this award. He was a kid that came from Washington Baptist, and just on sheer, we had two guys just like him in Chicago, Doug Plank and Gary Fensick. They played the game the right way. They wanted to knock the living hell out of you, and that's the way the game was played. And you know what? I loved the way he played, but I hated the Cowboys. And I'll never forget, when I was in college, and you know, by the end of my senior year, I was a pretty good player, and my agent had told me, you know, you're going to go pretty high in the draft. And I'll never forget, I walked into Wilson Sharp, the old dorm, and I miss that. Did they have the dorm when you were there?
Yes,
God Almighty, it's a new world now. We'd have empty beer kegs in the hallway. It was great. It was great. The basketball players and the football players, we got to live there like Animal House, didn't we, Mike? Oh, it was great. But I walked in the cafeteria, and Cornell Green, who was a scout for the Cowboys, was there. And I'm like, wow, he's a big guy. Cornell was like 6'3". I couldn't believe how big he was for a corner. Anyway, I get my food and I go through the deal. He comes up to me and goes, you're Dan Hampton? I said, yes, sir. And he goes, here. And he hands me about 40 pages, like a form to fill out. I said, what's that? He goes, well, you know, we at Dallas, we pride ourselves on evaluating the players to the 10th degree and blah, 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 and you need to fill this out. And I said, I don't think I'll be worried about filling that thing out. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, well, I don't want to, you know, don't want to hurt your feelings, but not only do I not want to waste an hour filling the thing out, but I don't want to play for the Cowboys. And he got indignant. He says, oh, really? And I said, yeah, I'll be gone long before you guys pick. And it was true. That was the fourth guy taken. They picked 28. So it was what it was. But Roger Staubach, like everyone that's played this game, Roger Staubach was one of our heroes. And I got to play against Roger Staubach. My rookie year, we go down to Dallas. And we actually find some way to get a lead. Walter Payton had a great first half, blah, blah, blah. Late in the third quarter, I hit him. And I don't know whether it was a botched handoff or something, but Staubach fumbled. Anyway, the ball was on the ground and I dove on it. Now, this is like the third game of the year. In college back then, you couldn't advance the ball. So I just fell on it. And as soon as I fell on the ball, I'm thinking, wow, this is great. I'm helping my team. And everybody on my defense is screaming, give me the ball, give me the ball, give me the ball. And I didn't know, because that was the first fumble I'd ever recovered in the pros. Anyway, after the whistle was blown, I'm getting up and I'm thinking everybody's happy, everybody's pissed off at me. And Roger Staubach walks up to me and goes, you played at Arkansas, didn't you? Yeah, wise guy, I did. But I got to know Roger over the years, but things got worse. By the time...
Wait, hold on. Mike?
What happened here?
There he goes.
Is it working?
Check. I think Dan pounded the podium so loud that was...
I think I moved it. It's good.
Oh, you should do that?
There we go.
There we go.
Bingo. Don't
Okay,
touch.
is that better? All right. Anyway, but anyway, see, so I was drafted by the Bears, but the last thing about this Cowboy thing, let me just tell you this. Ditka had played for the Cowboys when they won a Super Bowl back in the early 70s. And then he was an assistant coach when they won a Super Bowl in the late 70s. And so when the Bears hired him, he came from Dallas. He brought all the Dallas playbooks, all this, all that. Everything was Dallas. And after, we kind of resented it because we're Chicago, we're not Dallas. Anyway, so it just really made me angry. And one day in practice, I stood up and I screamed. I said, let's stop all this Dallas stuff because we're the Bears, have our own identity. And he told me years later, he said, I'm glad you said that because we didn't need to copy anybody. We need to do our own thing. Well, the Bears franchise had never beaten the Cowboys. And we get into the 1985 season, the season that, we wind up winning the Super Bowl. But there's many subplots to that season. And one of them was the third game of the preseason, we had a Monday Night Football game against the Cowboys in Dallas. And I think John Madden and Pat Summerall, the great Pat Summerall, they were doing the game. And I remember, and Ray Tucker, you and I were laughing about this after the season. We went down for the preseason game, and we went down there, and I'm telling you, nobody was laughing and nobody was having a good time because the Bears had never beaten the Cowboys at Tiddlywinks, ever, in anything. And so we wanted to make a statement. Well, we not only knocked out a couple of quarterbacks, but they had to stop the game 6 times for fistfights. Because we hated them and they hated us. They had Randy White, Danny White, Tony Dorsett. They had a great team. They'd been to the Super Bowl 2 or 3 times. And we were kind of like the upstarts, We wanted to kind of prove ourselves. So we go down there, and anyway, at the conclusion of the game, Don Pearson, the AP writer, said, man, I'd never seen a game like that. That was the most vicious preseason game I'd ever witnessed. And I said, yeah, well, we hate them and they hate us, but I'll tell you this, they better have that cart that carries people off gassed up because we're coming back in November. Well, that week of the game, I think we're 10-0, and all week long, Sports Center is running that quote on Sports Center. Oh, big game, 8-2 Dallas against the Bears, 10-0, blah blah blah. So I'm quite sure Tom Landry and the rest of them were aware of what I said. Anyway, we're on the plane going down there, and Finsick comes up to me and goes, here, look at this. And he shows me a quote in the paper where Everson Walls, their all-pro cornerback, says, yeah, the Bears are good. They're 10-0, but they really hadn't played nobody. Let's see how they are once, we get a chance at them. Well, as Jim said, we went out. I think the third play of the game, I batted a ball up. Richard Dent catches it and takes 2 steps into the end zone. The onslaught was on. Mike Singletary was screaming at the fans in the third quarter, stay, we need witnesses. We want witnesses. Running up the ramp at the end of the game, 44-0. I get to my locker, I take my pads off, I turn around, there's a sea of cameras. And one of the guys goes, well, what do you think? I said, Everson Walls is right. We're 11-0, we still ain't played nobody. So I don't like Dallas. Got to be proud of Jerry Jones. I got to tell you, everybody wants to know, how did this kid from a dirt road out in Cabot, Arkansas wind up in the Hall of Fame? And real quick, as Jim said, I played in 5th and 6th grade. And all you folks that got parents and grandkids, I want to just listen to me for a second. There is a lot of problems in the game today about the head injuries. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Maybe we'll have the chance to do Q&A. But let me just tell you this. If you got a grandkid that wants to play football, you help him any way you can, because it's a great game. It's a wonderful way of learning how to compete in life and becoming, responsible. Nobody's holding your hand. You got to do it yourself. And I started playing in 5th and 6th grade. My brother Matt and I were big Razorback fans. My father loved the Razorbacks. I grew up wanting to be a Razorback, and I'll never forget the time in it was 1984, and we were in the process of setting the all-time NFL record for quarterback sacks in a season. It was 1984, and I think we set the record for 72. It'll never be broke. Last year's leaders had 43. I'm just saying, we were just pillaging everybody. And after we had about 8 or 10 sacks on Tommy Kramer from Rice, who was the Vikings quarterback, they sent in Archie Manning. And, when somebody comes in the huddle, you over there, it's fourth quarter, we're just, we got our ears pinned back, we're coming after him. And about the third play, Archie, we run a double tackle twist where the tackles go up and the ends go upfield and then they loop underneath, and I was coming underneath, I was playing in. I come around the corner about 100 miles an hour, and Archie had seen the Red Sea part, and so he tucks the ball, here he comes. I come around, he doesn't see me coming, I hit him, and it sounds like a gun going off. Blows his face mask off his helmet. He's on the ground, and his nose looks like a taco. It's blood everywhere. And I say to myself, that's Archie Manning. He played for Ole Miss, and the Razorbacks beat Ole Miss. You remember this? Didn't they beat the Razorbacks, or they beat us?
They beat us in the Sugar Bowl.
But I was a little kid. I don't remember that. I do remember my dad won the IBM pool where we got our first color TV. So that's why I remember Archie Manning. Remember that, Matt? We got our first color TV. Anyway, so now I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, oh no, I killed Archie. I got to watch Gilligan in color because we got our first TV. Anyway, I'm sitting there watching him, and he's out cold as a wedge, and I get him off. 10 years later, I'm in Memphis. I'm playing in the St. Jude's Classic. And on the 15th and 9th hole, you got fairways going opposite directions. And there's this young kid. Oh, hell, it's been 12, 15 years ago. There's big geeky guys over there, and I'm getting out of the golf cart. And I look over there, and I'm saying, hey, that looks like Peyton Manning. Because the Razorbacks, had played Tennessee, and I knew what he looked like. And, he's tall guys, 6'6" or so. And he's getting out of the cart, and he looks at me, and I look at him, and he kind of waves, and he's getting his club, and then he wheels around, and he goes, hey, you're that dude that broke my daddy's nose. But I love the Razorbacks. So after 6th grade, the junior high coaches, and the way it was told to me was, I was 180 pounds and I could run like a 10 flat. And I could go. I grew up on a farm carrying bales of hay and all that. I was little Abner. And I was excited about playing. Well, after that fall, I was in a wheelchair for 4 months or so. And the doctor said, look, we had to put a plate and 4 screws in your right heel and take 80% of the bone out. You're not going to be able to walk comfortably, let alone play a contact sport. So, as you said, I did the normal thing here in Arkansas. I learned how to play the saxophone. And,
No politics.
don't worry, Ray, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say anything about Jennifer Flowers. Don't worry. Nothing. Anyway, let's focus here. Anyway, so I didn't, I'll never forget, I got to learn how to play guitar. My mom and dad knew how to play guitar, and so I was sitting in a wheelchair. I was watching Hee Haw one night, and at the conclusion of it, I said, if Buck Owens is smart enough to play guitar, you can teach me. So I learned how to play the guitar. Now I'm in the junior high band, and I'm playing the bass, okay, because the guy said we need a bass player, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm in senior high, and it's the 10th grade, and I'm up there in the band, and the team's getting the hell beat out of them. And anyway, at halftime, I get my saxophone, and I'm getting ready to take the Red Devil playing field. And Coach Reed walks by glaring at me like, what in the hell are you doing? You're 6'6", 240 pounds, holding a 12-pound saxophone. Well, that spring, he and a guy named Ron Mayton, they incessantly bothered me, and you need to play, you need to come out, and they said, we know about your leg, we know about all that stuff, but the good Lord heals you, and you got a chance. So anyway, I went out for football that summer, and he made a rule where I had to put in 100 hours of work to basically equate what they did in the off season, and I did it, and I don't know if I did 100, but it was pretty close, wasn't it, Coach? It was pretty close, close enough. Well, that first year we were 2-9, and I wasn't very good. But the next year, I had high hopes, and I had a motorcycle wreck the day before practice started. But I still was able to generate a lot of interest. And I didn't know this till later, but I told Coach Reed, I said, look, I know a lot of colleges may be sniffing around seeing if I could play, but if the Razorbacks, show interest, I have no interest. My father had died when I was in 8th grade, so by then, things were tight and tough, and the opportunity to go and play college football was an amazing opportunity for me. And sure enough, Coach Turner, I'll never forget, he recruited me and said, hey, we want you to come up, and we'd like for you to look around, and maybe we can, talk about extending you a scholarship. I said, great. Well, that weekend, my brother drove me up there, and I'll never forget it. We were supposed to have a recruiting party at Jimmy Johnson's house. So I went and I knocked on the door at Jimmy Johnson's house. The door opened, and there was Jimmy Johnson. His hair was perfect. And I said, I'm Dan Hampton. He goes, I know who you are, come in. And so we talked, and he said, look, we're going to offer you a scholarship, but, we don't know where we're going to play yet. And I said, oh, really? I said, what about my grades? Because I wasn't a very good student. He goes, well, I talked to the principal, and I think we got things worked out. I said, oh, really? He said, you're going to graduate 612 out of a class of 654. And I said, that's pretty good, isn't it? He said, no, overall, the principal said it was a stupid class, so that ain't that big a deal. Excellent. But I went up there, and I tell you what, my freshman year, I went up there, and I was homesick as could be. When my dad died, my brother, sister, my mom, and I got real close. And, you go up there, and it's 2-a-days, 3-a-days. Back then, thank you very little. 3-a-days. You're talking about how hot it is on the field. Back then, it was AstroTurf. And we would have 3 practices a day, and it would be 140 degrees. They should have been arrested for what they did to us back then, right? The way they worked us. But I tell you what, I was living the dream. And I think the Baylor game, the 4th game of the year, I actually started. We went to a 4-3 front, and I got to play some. And, we went on, and we beat Georgia in the Cotton Bowl. And even though I really had strong thoughts about, hey, I'll transfer to UCA, I was a homesick, I went home for 2 weeks, and I got so bored I couldn't wait for school to start again. So I never looked back. And how lucky was I to have the teammates that I did, the guys from Arkansas that I was recruited with from here in Little Rock and all over. Larry Jackson, who recently passed away a few years ago, he was a great player. ABC Defensive Player of the Year in 1978. Jimmy Walker. Jimmy Walker, the first time I ever saw Harold Horton, who, Steve, you threw a retirement party for a couple of years ago. I talked to a coach this morning. Jimmy Walker had kind of ate everything in Little Rock that summer, and he went from 220 to 280. And so when he got to the All-Star game, they put him at nose tackle, and nobody could block him. So the Razorbacks gave him a scholarship. Dale White was a linebacker for the East, and I was playing for the West. They moved me to guard, so I'd block him. I mean, it was such a great synergy of young players, and we're coming up there, and we're trying to, be a part of something and turn it around. And I got to tell you, we have a gentleman here in the audience today that, every football team has captains. Normally the captains are the ones that you look to when things go wrong. Hey, when you're up 40-0, nobody's looking around. They're looking at their wife or girlfriend, when you're down, when you fumble on the 5, this is the guy you look at. He was a great player for the Arkansas Razorbacks. He was the guy that my favorite player that I've ever played with, Bo Busby. He's sitting right over here. Bo, stand up, will you please? I got to bend down here and say, let me tell you, and I mean that with all sincerity. Like I said, when I got to Chicago, the 2 guys that I really loved playing with and for was plank and fencing. I don't know what it is about the safety position, but it's such a command of not only the field, but they're if you can get great safety play, boy, you got a lot of good fortune ahead of you. But, Bo was a great player. And even though things didn't work out for us that following year, how lucky was I that when Frank wanted to make a change, he brought in Lou Holtz. And I got to tell you, a lot of folks here in Arkansas still remember him very fondly. I still think the world of Lou. He's hard to put up with sometimes. But I got to tell you, a motivation machine. He was the guy. And I'll never forget the first time we got together, he challenged all of us. He said, hey, you guys got a lot of talent. You had great players at every position, but you went 5-5-1. I want to know what your goals are. And he started preaching about everybody needs to set goals and work towards those, because a goal is nothing more than a dream. You show me somebody without a goal, I'll show you somebody that doesn't care what happens today. I don't really care what happens today or next week. I'll never forget, he sent out a bunch of paper and pencils and said, I want you guys to write down your goals as a student athlete here at the University of Arkansas in that very first meeting. I didn't know what to write down. I'm looking over here, and this guy's writing, I want to get a degree. This one's writing down, I want to be all conference. My roommate, not real smart, he's writing down, I want to date a cheerleader. I wrote down, I want to win a national championship, because I'd never won anything in my life. And I thought that's the dream that we all should have. And we passed the papers up, and sure enough, he was going through the papers. He goes, which one of you wrote down, I want to win a national championship? And I fully expected 85% of the team to raise their hand. Nobody raised their hand, and I kind of sheepishly raised my hand. He said, you misspelled championship. By the way. But he says, that's exactly the attitude that we're going to have if we're going to turn this thing around. And ladies and gentlemen, you were firsthand witnesses to see it. One play kept us from winning the national championship the next year. We had Texas down. I can't remember, what was it, 9-6 or something like that. And late in the fourth quarter, I think a minute and 30 seconds or so, Texas, the only loss of the season, Texas throws it to a running back that had never caught a ball before then or after in his career. Of course, his name was Earl Campbell, and he went 73 yards. But that team came within one play of winning the national championship. But that year in the Orange Bowl, and my friend Doc Zimmerman over here just exemplifies why I love the Razorback fans. When I first met him 20 years ago, he couldn't wait to tell me the story about the Orange Bowl. He goes, oh yeah, I love the Orange Bowl. That was great. And at the time I was playing for the Bears, and I hate to say it, but I kind of moved on, and I was thinking about different things. He goes, oh no, that was the greatest thing we'd ever seen. He goes, I lived up in St. Vincent, a little town up above Moulton. He goes, I worked at the mill, and I'd saved up $50, and I bet $50 on the Razorbacks that night. And he said that was all the money I had in the world. And he said that night at the game, we went over to my friend's house, and there's 24 of us sitting in a trailer watching a 19-inch TV with only one couch in the house. There was 8 people on the floor, 8 people on the front cushion, 8 people on the back of the couch, and 8 people standing up. And he said everybody watched every second of that game. Now that is what being a Hog fan is all about right there, Doc. And that's why it was so great to be a part of that year and that team. My senior year, I got to tell you, I was highly disappointed. We lost to Texas again. Another bad call on me for roughing the passer that I think Lou still remembers quite vividly. In fact, every time I see him, he brings it up. But I'll never forget how wonderful it was to be a part of that group. Brad Shep from Carlisle, William Hampton from Forest City, Dale White from Benton, all these Arkansas kids. And yeah, we had some great players from outside the state, like Florida, David, and you guys later on. But Arkansas had to play against every team in Texas and Texas officials. You remember how tough the sledding was back then? It was BS, I'm telling you. That's why we're in the SEC today. Because Frank said, that's enough, we're out of here. And I think it was my call against Texas that got it. But to be able to play for the Razorbacks was fantastic. But little did I know that some other great things were ahead of me. When I was drafted by the Bears, I was horrified. In 1978, they had like a blizzard that had 5 foot of snow. And that was 2 days before the draft. And when they drafted me, they wanted to fly me up, but the airports were closed. And I'll never forget, I was down at the complex. I was all bubbly. I got drafted. I couldn't believe it. And Lou Holtz came by, and he goes, hey, I heard you got drafted by Chicago. And I said, yes, sir. And he goes, don't go. I said, what are you talking about? You're Mr. Optimistic. What do you mean? He goes, don't forget, I came from the Jets. I got fired from the Jets because I was 1-9. Guess what? The only win, the one, that was the Bears. Don't go. He says Hallis doesn't know what he's doing. He's got bad coaching, and they don't have any play. You waste your career. Don't go. Well, they sent me a ticket 2 weeks later to go up for a mini camp, and I had to go. So I flew up there, and I got to appraise this situation, and it wasn't impressive. We had the greatest player in the game, Walter Payton, but very little else. A lot of guys out of shape, sleeping in meetings, blah, 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 coming in late. And I asked Buddy Ryan, I said, how bad is this team? He goes, well, we're not that bad. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, we played the Pittsburgh Steelers last year. They're world champions, right? And I said, yeah. He says, we only got beat by 5. I didn't know he meant 5 touchdowns. It was 35-0. I flew back and I saw Lou 2 days later. He said, hey, I heard you went to Chicago. And I said, yeah. He said, what do you think? I said, I think you underestimated the severity of the problem, quite honestly. But back then, in the NFL, you had no choice. And so here I go. So I go up there, my rookie year, and I lay it on the line. And how lucky was I that I got to go to a place where it's a mecca of pro football. For a lot of you that don't know, pro football was started by basically George Halas. And George Halas, started it in Decatur, Illinois. And after a few years, he brought it to Chicago. And the Chicago Bears have now 29 members in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And when I stood on that stage in Canton, Ohio, 11 years ago, I thought about an awful lot of things. But how lucky was I that Bill Reed kept pestering me to get me out of the band, get me on that football field. How lucky was I that Ken Turner didn't laugh when he saw me as a high school senior, I had long hair, glasses, rode a motorcycle. I was, I didn't look like your, typical defensive lineman. How lucky was I that I was a part of a team that had great coaches, like, Jimmy Johnson was a great defensive coordinator. I told this story the other day. I actually told it on the radio today. Jimmy Johnson would pay somebody out of his pocket to go and videotape, well, when a video is, and it's Super 8, the Zapruder film, those little cameras. He would have somebody do the first 8 minutes of the game and then go, in his Mustang, drive it and get it developed, come back and be there at halftime so we could watch it and make corrections and assignment orders, at halftime. They don't do that in the NFL today. I mean, how smart and then Monty Kiffin, the great Monty Kiffin, brought the black shirts to Arkansas. Monty came. The problem was Monty was a great defensive coordinator for Lou, and Harold Horton became my defensive line coach, and they meant so much to us. But I got to tell you, as much as I love Monty Kiffin, he did bring Lane Kiffin into the picture. You know what I'm saying? As painful as that is. But the one thing that I wanted to touch on real quickly is years ago when I first got a little taste of what it meant to be, an all-pro, I had a great, figure to observe in talking about Walter Payton. And I played with so many great ones. And, wherever I was, Bill Reed was a master builder. That team that went 2-9 my first year, my junior year, then 7-4, then I think they won 2 or 3 state championships in a row. That doesn't just happen. You start it by doing the right things and building from the ground up, just like you do a church, a community, a luncheon club, whatever it may be. Football team's no different. You find the right coaches, you find the right players, and you start building for the future. When I got to college, like I said, a lot of those players, they became all conference, they became all Americans. We won a tremendous amount of football games because Lou Holtz was a master builder. Then I got to the Bears, and even though the first 3 years not so good, Ditka was hired in '82, and he came in, and Papa Bear said, "Look, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be around, but this is the man that played for me, that was drafted by me, that's going to take us to our first Super Bowl." And Ditka got us together in a meeting. He said, "Guys, I played in the Super Bowl, and I've coached in the Super Bowl, and I know what it takes to get there. And I've got a plan to get us, as the Chicago Bears, to a Super Bowl. And I got good news and I got bad news. Good news is, if you do what we ask you to do, you commit yourself to excellence, and you play in a very unselfish style, you're going to be a part of that effort. But the bad news is maybe you're not going to. Maybe you're not going to be willing to do the things that we're going to ask you to do, the extra work, to show up, all the different things that we're going to have you endure. 4 years later, we're down in New Orleans. And as Jim mentioned, it was an amazing, amazing season. We were 15-1. And just to tell you how good this team is, about 5 years ago, I was doing an appearance at a Chevy dealership, and it was raining and sleeting, and nobody came, and they had a TV, and they had the playoff game of the Giants on. And that 1985 playoff game, let me tell you how good this team is. We beat the New York Giants, who would win the next year's Super Bowl. They were a great team. But we beat them 21-0 in about 5 degrees below zero weather. But I watched that game. Our quarterback, Goofball McMahon, he was horrible. Horrible. Peyton played terrible. I played terrible. Singletary played terrible. 3 Hall of Famers and your starting quarterback play terrible football, and you still dominate maybe the second best team in the league. The championship game was in Chicago, and it was against the Los Angeles Rams. Now, I understand John Robinson was here. Is that correct? Yeah. John Robinson, I think he must have told you guys. I knew a little bit about this because I became great friends with John Madden and Pat Summerall over the years. And John Robinson and Madden would always, they had a standing deal. Whatever game that Madden would do of John Robinson, they'd go out to dinner the night before, on Saturday night before the Sunday game. And Madden was telling me this story. He said, I remember that before that game, we decided we're going to go to Morton's Steakhouse, great place there in Chicago. And he said, I swung by in a cab and I picked up John at their hotel. We went, we were laughing and joking, talking about family and blah, blah, blah. He said about 11 o'clock, the wine was empty and we're finished with our meal and we're just sitting there. And he said, John Robinson looked at me, he says, they're pretty good, aren't they? And Madden says, you know what, Summerall and I was thinking about this the other day. We've done like 11 games, and I think we only seen 1 touchdown scored on their defense all year. John Robinson laughs, goes, oh, they ain't that good. They're not that good. At the completion of the game the next day, 23-0, John Madden says he pulled a hamstring running to the locker room, where he walks in and John Robinson is there. It looks like, he's, at the end of his wits. And John Madden says, yep, for a team that ain't very good, they sure beat the hell out of you guys. But it was an amazing ride. And you know what? As I stood on that stage in Canton, Ohio, a lot of guys that I was there with, Jim Kelly and Dave Casper, and they did the appropriate thing, and they talked about their career and their accomplishments. But all I could think about was how lucky I was that I got a chance to play for this man over here. How lucky I was to get the chance to play with this man and J.R. Ross, who's here today, and all these other guys. All these Arkansans that loved Arkansas football, that got a chance to be a part of it. And how lucky was I that I got to play 12 years at the mecca of pro football and play for probably what I think it's pretty much universal now. ESPN, all kinds of different media outlets have said is the greatest football team of all time. And inherent upon that was the fact that everywhere I was associated with people that wanted to be special, but we were led by a master builder. It reminds me of a poem that Lou used to have. It goes like this. I saw a group of men in my hometown prepared to tear a building down. With a heave and a hoe and a mighty yell, they swung a beam and a sidewall fell. I asked this man, are these men skilled? The type you'd hire if you wanted to build? He laughed and said, no, indeed. Common labor is all I need, because I can tear down in a day or two what it took a skilled builder 10 years to do. Boy, I tell you what, for 5 years, we won more games than any team in NFL history. We had 7 different starting quarterbacks, but we won more games than any team in NFL history. We only got 1 Super Bowl. And yes, that grates on me. But I got to tell you, how lucky was I that I was there to be a part of it when it all came back together. Not only for Jacksonville and the Red Devils, but for the Razorbacks. And I understand that you guys still watch that Orange Bowl game on occasion. Is that true? Yeah. But I bet I look skinny on that. Boy, they used to run us like nobody's business. But in closing, like I said, that team was great. And we have an owner in the Hall of Fame. We had the general manager in the Hall of Fame, Jim Finks, who was truly the builder of that football team. Had a great motto. Jim Finks' the motto was upon his death, his son, and he never said it, and I wrote it down. I think I can paraphrase it. It basically goes like this. If we in life are ever unlucky enough to have it made, then we fail to become, we fail to be participants, and now we become spectators. Because the grind of life is what it's all about. Is it tough and rocky and uphill? Yes, all the way to the very end. Well, in 1985, like I said, may have been the greatest football team of all time, but the best player on that team was Walter Payton. In 1995, we got together out on Navy Pier. There was a great restaurant called Riva's, and we had a wonderful reunion, 10-year anniversary. Dick actually showed up sober. I mean, it was great. But the guy that stole the show was Walter Payton. Walter was 40 years old at the time. He still looked like he could play. He looked magnificent. That was 1995. 4 years later, Walter passed away. And every time we get close to football season, I always think about duck hunting. And I'm thinking about coming down to see you, Bo Busby. But Walter and I went duck hunting 3 or 4 different years on the bye week down in Peoria. And we'd be driving down there and we'd talk and all that. And they did a study on the geese flying south for the winter. And every time the fall comes and the football season's on us and we get into October, November, and I see those geese, I always think about Walter. The scientists that study the geese, they come up with some amazing facts. Real quickly, I'll tell you what they are. The first thing they found out is that the geese fly in that V formation because flying in that formation, they can fly 87% further in the course of a day than they could by themselves. And I took that to mean, man, how smart is that? These people know. These birds know. How much more you can accomplish as a team when you play together, when you work together. Second thing they found out is that bird at the point that's actually breaking the envelope of air, creating the wind shear that allows the other birds to penetrate the air. He's got the toughest job, and consequently, he can only stay at the point a relatively short period of time because he wears out. It's just too hard. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that sounds like every team. We can't expect everybody else to do all the heavy lifting and all the hard work. We all got to pitch in. We all got to do our share. Third thing they found out is if a bird leaves the formation for any reason, for any length of time, they don't stay out very long. It's just too tough. And they know how hard it is, and so they come back. Fourth thing they found out is, you hear them honking up there, honk, honk, as they're flying. I took that to thinking, Michael and I, we used to be in the meeting rooms always laughing and honking at everybody, making fun of them. Well, they're not making fun, they're encouraging. They're trying to tell the leaders to keep up the speed. How many of us like to hear a word of encouragement? Hey, you're doing a good job, man, this is great. But the last thing they found out is if a bird ever has to leave the formation due to sick, injured, or illness, and has to go to the ground to recover, 2 other birds will accompany it, and they will stay with that bird until one of 2 things happens. Either it regains its ability to fly and it can rejoin the flock, or it dies. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, isn't that something that we as human beings should be thinking about, to be caring for those amongst us less fortunate? Well, I always think of Walter, and he was a true mountain of a man, and he cared about everybody. He was the perfect teammate, exemplary in all facets and phases. But I was one of those people that I was so lucky to be at the right place at the right time. Ladies and gentlemen, I greatly appreciate you taking time out after this wonderful Memorial Day weekend. I'm so proud of the Hogs. I know Bielema. Madison's only 150 miles from Chicago. I think he's going to be a fantastic coach. The Bears got a new coach. We've got a new guy. Hopefully he'll get our quarterback, Jay Cutler, on track, and hopefully we'll be back in the playoffs soon. But thank you again for coming today. I'm the luckiest guy you'll ever meet, and I love you, Hog fans. I appreciate you coming, and thank you, David, for that wonderful award. I bless you.
Well done. Perfect job. Dan Hampton, everybody. Great job, Dan. All right, Tom Osborne next week. We'll see you then. Great job.